I'd always believed paradise had a price tag, and luckily for me, it was one I could easily afford. My name is William Carter, and wealth has always defined my life and shaped my expectations. Vacationing at a luxurious resort in Phuket, Thailand, with my son Ethan felt no different, just another deserved indulgence in a lifetime filled with privilege. Ethan attended one of Thailand's most prestigious international schools. It was exclusive, expensive, and above all, selective. I prided myself in providing Ethan with the best education, ensuring he associated with people who shared our status. But Ethan wasn't like me. He befriended people for their character, not their bank accounts. It was something I admired, yet secretly struggled to understand. That morning was especially beautiful. Clear blue skies, soft white sands, the soothing sound of waves gently lapping the shore. Ethan had invited a friend from school, Marcus, to join us. I'd only briefly met Marcus once before, but that encounter had left me uneasy. Marcus was friendly enough, but there was something about him. Perhaps it was his humble background, or maybe it was my own prejudices whispering. That unsettled me. Marcus arrived, smiling shyly, his demeanor reserved yet respectful. He was tall and slender, with a warmth in his eyes that reminded me, uncomfortably, of simpler times from my own past, times I preferred to forget. Despite this, the boys seemed genuinely happy, laughing and joking as they walked along the beach. But paradise has an ugly habit of turning sour unexpectedly. Later that afternoon, Marcus accidentally knocked over a tray of drinks near the resort pool, spilling them all over my belongings. It was a small incident, harmless really, but embarrassment quickly turned to anger. In that brief moment, my composure slipped, and my true nature, cruel, impatient, and arrogant, rose sharply to the surface. "Do you have any idea how expensive this is?" I snapped. The tone of my voice cut through the laughter around the pool like a blade. Marcus froze, eyes wide, humiliation flooding his face as nearby guests fell silent, watching. "Dad," Ethan pleaded quietly, embarrassed by my outburst, but my anger was already unleashed. "You shouldn't even be here," I continued harshly, feeling a twisted satisfaction in asserting dominance. "A charity case like you is nothing but trouble." Marcus stood there silently, the dignity draining from his posture, and without a word, he turned and walked away, his shoulders hunched with shame. Ethan stared at me, disappointment clear in his eyes. In that moment, I felt justified, superior, powerful. Little did I know, the seeds planted by my cruelty were about to grow into something far beyond my control. Something that would soon force me to face the darkest truths about myself, beneath the rubble of paradise lost. The beauty of paradise can often mask its inherent fragility. The morning after the confrontation with Marcus, a subtle yet ominous tension lingered in the air. Ethan's disappointment in me was unmistakable. He avoided conversation at breakfast, his silence a louder condemnation than any words he could have spoken. We were scheduled to attend a lavish event at our luxury hotel later that afternoon. The grandeur of the hotel was always reassuring to me, a reflection of my own status. Marble floors, ornate decorations, crystal chandeliers, it all reinforced my feeling of superiority and control. Ethan, however, seemed detached, his mind clearly elsewhere, likely thinking about Marcus. As we entered the elegant ballroom, crowded with other affluent guests, I felt a slight vibration beneath my feet. Initially dismissing it as mere imagination, I continued engaging in trivial conversations, oblivious to the warning signs. Ethan remained distant, his gaze drifting frequently toward the exit, perhaps wishing he were anywhere else. Then, suddenly, the vibration intensified violently. Before any of us could react, a deafening rumble filled the room. The chandelier above began to swing menacingly, and within moments, panic replaced the refined atmosphere. Glass shattered, tables overturned, and screams echoed everywhere. An earthquake, violent and unrelenting, shook Phuket with a fury that left us all powerless. I reached desperately for Ethan as the floor beneath us cracked, splitting the room apart. Our eyes locked, both wide with terror, but before we could speak, the ceiling began to collapse, raining debris down upon us. We scrambled helplessly, trying to avoid falling beams and chunks of stone. Ethan screamed my name, his voice filled with a fear I'd never heard from him before. "Ethan, hold on to me," I yelled, lunging forward, grabbing his arm just as the floor gave way beneath us. Together, we fell into darkness, tumbling downward as everything we knew collapsed around us. I shielded Ethan as best as I could, absorbing impacts as debris slammed into me from all sides. Then, silence. A silence more terrifying than the chaos moments before. Trapped beneath a mountain of rubble, darkness swallowed us whole. The weight pressing down felt suffocating, each breath painful and precious. Ethan's breathing was rapid and panicked beside me, his voice trembling. "Dad, are we going to die?" In that moment, stripped of my wealth, my pride, and my arrogance, I was utterly helpless. Fear surged through me, overwhelming and relentless, yet even stronger was the wave of regret that flooded my heart. My cruel words to Marcus echoed hauntingly in my mind, accompanied by the painful realization that my superiority meant nothing now. I could neither buy nor command our rescue. "Ethan," I whispered, voice shaking, "we'll make it out of this. I promise." But deep within me, uncertainty festered, gnawing at my confidence. Paradise was gone, reduced to rubble and dust, and for the first time in my life I felt vulnerable, fearful, and desperately alone. Marcus walked the crowded streets of Phuket in the suffocating midday heat, sweat soaking his faded shirt, his gaze fixed firmly on the dusty pavement. Life had changed drastically for him since the humiliating incident at Ethan's school. He could still hear William Carter's cruel words clearly in his ears, a painful echo that refused to fade. "A charity case like you is nothing but trouble." Those words had not only stripped him of his scholarship, they had torn away his dignity and shattered his dreams of a brighter future. Forced out of school, Marcus had faced harsh realities far sooner than he had imagined. He took on odd jobs, washing dishes in crowded restaurants, delivering groceries to hotels, and hauling boxes at local markets. Every penny earned went directly to medicine for his ailing mother, whose health deteriorated steadily, yet quietly. Despite his tireless efforts, Marcus couldn't shake the sting of humiliation. He avoided Ethan, his only true friend, out of shame, though he missed their friendship deeply. His mother never blamed him. Instead, she looked at him with gentle understanding, her eyes filled with silent pride for the strength her son showed daily. Still, Marcus felt inadequate, carrying the heavy burden of guilt. One particularly tough day, after finishing a long shift at a bustling market, Marcus sat alone near the shoreline, staring out at the restless waves. He remembered Ethan's jokes, their laughter, and carefree afternoons by this very beach. Now, those happy memories felt like painful reminders of a life that had slipped out of reach. Marcus wondered if Ethan ever thought of him or understood his struggle. Suddenly, the ground beneath him jolted violently, knocking him off balance. Screams erupted along the beach as tourists and locals scrambled in confusion. Marcus instinctively turned toward the city, his heart pounding as he saw plumes of dust rising from downtown Phuket. Fear surged through Marcus's veins. Ethan was there, at that luxurious hotel. His chest tightened painfully at the thought of Ethan in danger. Without a second thought, Marcus sprinted toward the chaos, pushing aside his own fears and bitter memories. He could not afford to lose Ethan, too. As he ran toward the disaster, determination and dread clashed within him. Marcus was no longer the scholarship student humiliated out of school. He was now a young man driven by friendship, courage, and compassion, even if it meant confronting his darkest memories and the man who had caused him so much pain. Darkness wrapped itself around William and Ethan like a heavy shroud, thick with silence except for their labored breathing and occasional shifting of rubble. The once grand hotel ballroom was now reduced to a suffocating tomb, an oppressive prison of twisted metal, shattered stone, and choking dust. William struggled to suppress panic. Every breath he took felt painfully shallow. Beside him, Ethan shivered uncontrollably, gripping his father's arm tightly, his earlier cold silence replaced with fearful vulnerability. "Dad," Ethan whispered weakly, his voice trembling. "I'm scared." William squeezed his son's hand tightly, desperately trying to sound reassuring despite his own overwhelming fear. "I'm here, Ethan. We'll be okay. Rescue teams will come soon." Yet deep inside, William was haunted by a terrifying doubt. Would they be found in time? With each passing moment, the uncertainty intensified, feeding the dread gnawing at his gut. He began to replay scenes from his life, moments he'd thought insignificant now flooding him with crushing regret. The image that kept resurfacing was Marcus's devastated face, the humiliation he'd inflicted on the innocent teenager. For the first time, William felt deep shame, understanding clearly the pain he'd caused. It was as if being trapped beneath the rubble had cracked open the shell of his privilege and pride, forcing him to confront a lifetime of arrogance and selfishness. As the hours crawled by, Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness, weakened by exhaustion and dehydration. William did his best to stay awake, determined to keep his son alive, fighting against his own growing despair. Yet, the memories continued to torment him, each one sharper and more painful than the last. "Marcus," William whispered quietly to the darkness, tasting bitter remorse on his tongue. "I was wrong about you, so terribly wrong." In the oppressive silence, William found himself desperately hoping, perhaps even praying, for forgiveness, for redemption, for a second chance he feared he might never have. The proud millionaire was now humbled, broken, and finally aware of the weight his cruelty had carried. Somewhere beyond the rubble, the faint sound of distant voices stirred hope. William strained to hear, his pulse quickening. Could it be rescuers? His heart leaped at the possibility. He squeezed Ethan's limp hand gently, renewed determination surging through him. "Hold on, Ethan," he urged softly, voice breaking with emotion. "They're coming. We'll get through this, and I'll make things right. I promise." Amid the dust-filled chaos of the devastated streets of Phuket, Marcus moved tirelessly, driven by a potent blend of adrenaline and anxiety. His heart pounded wildly in his chest, every beat echoing a relentless fear for Ethan's safety. He had joined a hastily formed local rescue team, quickly organizing efforts amid cries of desperation and confusion. Buildings had crumbled into heaps of concrete and twisted metal, and the air hung heavy with the cries of survivors and the sobs of those searching for loved ones. Despite his exhaustion, Marcus pushed forward, carrying water and medical supplies, helping clear debris, his mind continuously racing back to Ethan. Each passing minute heightened his dread. "Have you found anyone from the Grand Hotel yet?" Marcus asked urgently, sweat mixing with dirt on his brow as he helped move a large piece of rubble. "No survivors yet," replied a weary rescuer, shaking his head grimly. "We're trying, but the damage is severe." Marcus felt his chest tighten painfully. Ethan had been at that very hotel. Marcus had seen him and his father there earlier. He quickened his pace, desperation fueling his strength. Approaching the collapsed building, he paused briefly, staring in horror at the rubble that had swallowed so many lives. Suddenly, Faint cries echoed from beneath the debris, barely audible but unmistakably human. Marcus's pulse quickened, and without hesitation he moved closer, heart racing with hope and urgency. He began digging furiously alongside other rescuers, his fingers scraped and bleeding, pain ignored in the fervor of the moment. "We hear you!" he called out, his voice firm but gentle, filled with encouragement. "Hold on. We're coming." As they cleared away chunks of concrete and twisted metal beams, Marcus strained to see into the darkness. Gradually, a small gap opened up, revealing two shadowy figures trapped beneath. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him, quickly followed by a stab of emotional turmoil. In the dim light, he recognized the familiar face of Ethan, unconscious and pale, lying protectively in his father's embrace. Then his eyes met the other face, bruised and exhausted but painfully familiar. William Carter, the man who had shattered his dreams and dignity. Time stood still. Marcus hesitated, the bitter sting of past humiliation resurfacing sharply. But as William looked up desperately, their gazes locked, a pleading look in the millionaire's eyes that spoke of remorse, fear, and vulnerability. Marcus saw, perhaps for the first time, genuine regret in the man who had once demeaned him so cruelly. In that instant, Marcus made his choice. Pushing his own hurt aside, he reached out firmly, his voice steady and compassionate, despite the turmoil inside him. "We're here now. We'll get you out," Marcus promised resolutely, signaling urgently to his teammates to help. As they worked, Marcus felt something profound shift within him, a recognition that courage and compassion were far more powerful than bitterness and resentment. Even beneath the crushing weight of their shared history, humanity triumphed. The rescue operation intensified as the minutes ticked by, each second seeming agonizingly slow. Marcus worked tirelessly, fueled by an unshakable determination to save Ethan and, despite everything, his father. William watched Marcus through the small gap, his eyes filled with an unspoken apology and newfound humility. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the opening widened enough for Marcus and his team to reach William and Ethan. Marcus gently took Ethan into his arms, feeling his friend's faint heartbeat, whispering quietly, "You're safe now, Ethan. I'm here." William struggled weakly as rescuers carefully pulled him free, collapsing onto the dusty street, exhausted and battered. He lifted his head slowly, eyes locking once again with Marcus's gaze, heavy with regret. "Marcus," William's voice cracked, full of raw vulnerability, I owe you my son's life and my own. I can never repay what you've done." Marcus stood frozen, holding Ethan protectively. Anger and pain still simmered beneath the surface, yet compassion softened his expression. "Mr. Carter," he began, voice gentle but firm, "I didn't do it to settle debts or prove a point. Ethan is my friend." William nodded slowly, eyes shimmering with tears. "I'm so deeply sorry, Marcus. I was blinded by pride and ignorance. I see now how wrong I was, about everything, especially about you." Marcus felt his chest tighten, conflicting emotions battling within him. "Words can't undo everything that happened," he said quietly, carefully handing Ethan to medical personnel who rushed to provide urgent care. "But maybe actions can." William reached out shakily, grabbing Marcus's hand weakly, desperation in his grip. "Give me a chance to make this right," he pleaded, "not just for my conscience, but because you've taught me something invaluable about true strength and humility." Marcus hesitated briefly, before gently squeezing William's hand in return, signaling the start of healing, though cautious and uncertain. Around them, rescue workers and survivors began applauding softly, inspired by the powerful moment of forgiveness and redemption unfolding amid the devastation. Marcus stepped back, releasing William's hand, knowing their paths were now intertwined in ways neither could have imagined. Amid the rubble, amidst loss and chaos, something meaningful had taken root. Hope, healing, and a painful yet necessary redemption. In the aftermath of the earthquake, Phuket slowly began to pick itself up, its spirit bruised but unbroken. News of Marcus's heroism spread swiftly, his brave act becoming a symbol of hope and unity amidst tragedy. Yet Marcus himself felt overwhelmed by the newfound attention, unsure how to navigate the praise and recognition that now surrounded him. William, deeply changed by his harrowing experience, sought every opportunity to make amends, not just through words, but genuine actions. As Marcus recovered at home with his mother, exhausted but relieved, a knock came at their door one evening. Marcus opened it to find William standing humbly, Ethan by his side, a nervous but hopeful look in both their eyes. "Marcus," William began softly, sincerity clear in his voice, "I didn't want to delay this. I've created a scholarship in your name. It's dedicated to supporting deserving students like you, who face unnecessary barriers, students whose potential should never be crushed by arrogance and prejudice." His voice shook slightly, thick with genuine emotion. Marcus stared silently, momentarily overwhelmed. His mother stepped forward, tears glistening in her eyes, her gentle hand resting reassuringly on Marcus's shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered to William, her voice filled with gratitude and pride for her son's strength. William extended a small folder toward Marcus, inside of which were documents detailing the new scholarship fund. Marcus accepted it hesitantly, his eyes scanning the pages briefly, still trying to process the magnitude of the gesture. Ethan stepped forward, breaking the tense silence. "Marcus, this doesn't fix everything. I know that. But it's a step, right?" Marcus glanced at Ethan, the friend he had missed deeply. Finally, a warm smile spread across his face. "It is. It means a lot. Thank you. Both of you." William nodded, visibly relieved, his gaze filled with a newfound humility and understanding. "If there's ever anything more I can do to support you or your family, please let me know. I've learned the hard way that genuine strength comes from kindness, not from status." Marcus's mother invited William and Ethan inside, the small room soon filling with quiet, hopeful conversation. The wounds of the past were far from forgotten, but healing had begun. Marcus felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in a long time, realizing he no longer carried the burden alone. As evening descended softly upon Phuket, it carried whispers of hope, resilience, and redemption, signaling that even from the deepest ashes, something beautiful and meaningful could still emerge.